People are moving to Salmon Bay not just for the promise of a growing new city, but because of the Pacific Northwest's easy access to water and mountains for all types of outdoor activity. But the Cascadian dream is falling short here in Salmon Bay, which has no formal parks department, and what parks the city has built have not been maintained at all. Today, we're going to start correcting that by establishing a city parks department, building a few custom parks, and making some big expansions to the city's footprint. Welcome back to Salmon Bay. Okay, real quick before we start, I want to delete the 2 landfills in the city. Finally. This frees up quite a bit of budget and will greatly reduce pollution over fishing spear. For today's first build, I want to build a small shopping center and office park in this empty space between the recycling plant and the rail yard. This will be a small car-oriented mall. This is the first time in Salmon Bay building this kind of parking lot-oriented build, and I don't want to make a habit of it, but I do think it makes sense to put it here in this space. I can't build housing here because of the pollution from the recycling plant, and it's along the highway with a lot of traffic near a suburban neighborhood, so this is as good a place as any to put some stores meant for cars. I'm starting with the road layout. I have to be careful to leave enough space for buildings. Parking lots can conform to weird shapes much easier than buildings, so I'm prioritizing the shape of the buildable lots on the outside edges, and then I'll fill in the middle with parking stalls. I'm mixing road types here between alleys without sidewalks and streets with sidewalks. I think it's important for commercial buildings to be facing sidewalks to give patrons safe areas to walk, but there will be a lot less pedestrian activity around the offices, and the space is very compact, so I'm okay with leaving off sidewalks there. To serve the traffic stopping here, I'm widening the highway to 4 lanes, and I will add traffic signals to the turn-in intersections. I'm going to leave room between the parking aisles for landscaping, so I'll be planting trees and things later on. My plan is to have the main strip of stores in the back blocking the view of the recycling plant, with a couple of larger specific uses on the north side in front of the farm. In between the parking and the highway, I want to squeeze in a couple of restaurants or cafes. Those kinds of uses do well in satellite lots on the outside of parking lots. For the buildings that make up the actual mall, I'm plopping in regular commercial buildings. I decided to go with individual buildings lined up along the street rather than a wall-to-wall strip mall look. I put some thought into what the buildings look like and where they are, mainly picking ones without their own parking, but maybe this isn't the most realistic. I think strip malls are kind of ugly, and I don't have too many good wall-to-wall commercial assets to work with either, so that's why I went with this style. But if you'd rather see one big rectangle here, let me know. For the office park, I will zone everything in here instead of manually placing buildings. Offices are more visually consistent in this game, and I'm not as concerned about making sure they look or line up a certain way. The parking lot back here will have less landscaping and be a little more dense, since this is a workplace instead of a destination. It's a lot of parking, but that's just how these things go. The offices will back right up to the train tracks, which hopefully won't be too loud because these lines feed into the rail yard and would only be used when a train parks there for maintenance. There shouldn't be so much train traffic immediately behind the offices that they won't be usable. Going back to the mall, I do want to make sure this area has a gas station, and then I'll zone in a couple of 5x5 and 6x6 buildings, which I'm hoping will grow in as grocery stores and things like that. Unfortunately, the city's demand for commercial has zeroed out, so we'll just have to wait and see how those lots end up getting filled. Now I'll start cleaning up the build. I'm decorating the streets feeding into the mall with trees, and I'll get rid of the on-street parking along the edges of the parking lot, because that just doesn't make any sense at all. I'm seeing fishing spear residents walking the highway to get here, so I need to add in some sidewalks. It's possible Sims will even walk here from the tram stop in the village. Instead of urbanizing the highway, I'm adding a separated sidewalk along the back of the neighborhood, which will connect the traffic lights. Hopefully this will make the walk safer for pedestrians, while also allowing the driving speed to stay high since this road gets pretty heavy traffic. Now I'll go through and add some landscaping around the build. I'll use recolor to make the assets use the same color schemes, clean up the crosswalks, and otherwise just finalize the build. Over on the fishing spear side, there's this empty space inside the tile we purchased, and I'm going to fill it in with another one of these farms and just extend the village out to the edge of what we own. And there's our shopping center. Mediocre land uses filling up mediocre land. Lots of parking lots, lots of economic activity. Now let's shift gears and start building parks. First, we need a parks department to maintain the parks, and we have all this city-owned space that just opened up after the landfill was closed. I'll put in the parks maintenance building here and do some light landscaping around it, and then I'll name it Salmon Bay Parks Rec. With the parks department established, let's build our first of 2 custom waterfront parks. This park is right in front of the city's big power plant, so let's think about why this park would exist. The power plant was built here because it's at the mouth of a river, and it's going to use a lot of the river's water for its cooling systems. This location, however, is right on top of the original site of the Native American settlement Fishing Spear, which is now the suburban village nearby. So I imagine that as part of the agreement to acquire the land when the city's power utility was incorporated to build the plant, Salmon City Light is building this park for the community and to honor the history of the people who live here. Therefore, the main feature of the park will be a coastal longhouse, either refurbished or recreated here, the type of multifamily building that the native occupants would have lived in right where the power plant is today. Finding the right story for a build, even a pretty small one, can really sell the place as something special to you and to your community. To build the park, I started with the basic small park asset, which I've placed far enough from the parking alley that I can place this pergola pocket park in between. I've disassembled the park a bit with better bulldozers that I can blend it into the other assets in the area and make it look like the centerpiece of a larger park than its base. Extending the paths around the whole area and filling in the center with the grass surface makes it look cohesive. I also placed in a small playground, an outdoor eating area, and a 2x2 commercial building which will be the park's concession stand. For the last amenity, I'll build the replica longhouse. I'm squishing together 3 barn props and lining them up to look like one big barn. The architecture is quite a bit more modern than what a real longhouse would have looked like, but I think the size is pretty correct, and I'm just working with what I've got here. Now I'm using the recolor mod to find colors for the siding and roof that will make it look like it's made out of natural unpainted wood, which I'll then copy and paste onto the other barns as well. And then I'll put in a gravel surface around the entrance to the longhouse and a couple of little wooden benches for seating. Don't worry about the tents. It only makes sense that our brand new park is immediately inhabited by some homelessness. This is based on Seattle, after all. Now I need to manually place lighting in the park, and then I'll round it out with some trees. I'll make sure to include a few large leafy trees because parks like this are a lot better when there's access to shade as well as sun. And there we go, the Longhouse Cultural Park brought to us by the regional Salish tribes in cooperation with Salmon City Light. For the second park, I want something with more of an ability to host events, birthdays or city holiday celebrations, that kind of thing. I've picked this open area on the water where the highway comes into Fishing Spear from the city of Salmon Bay. I'll put in some walking paths to connect to the village, but mostly I'm expecting Sims to drive, and if we want to host events here, the parking lot will have to be decently big. For the park, I'm using this large community park. I like this asset a lot. It has a little stage, a skate park, plenty of green areas, and some dining. It's just about everything. The only modification I'll make to the asset is to replace the perimeter path with a larger pedestrian street. I'm mainly doing this because I'm going to want to place other park assets along the outside, so I want the perimeter of the park to support zoning. Next, I'll clean up the terrain, fix up the surfaces so that they align with the new perimeter, and then I'll place those extra park assets on the outside. I will add 2 things that the main park here doesn't already have: a large playground, which I think is very important, as well as a dog park. I want to add a side road connection mainly to keep the park from being completely cul-de-saced, and a pedestrian connection so Sims can walk to the park from the village or the nearest tram stop. And then I'll landscape. I'll continue the large trees along the highway that we're already doing further down the road, and then I'll plant a sort of natural looking buffer between this park and the private industrial business nearby. I'm also building an actual beach here, but I'm really not going to spend much time on it. There aren't really any beach assets yet, and I don't want to spend a bunch of time detailing a beach that Sims won't even care about. So I'm just placing in a rocky beach with a surface, a gazebo and a grill, some lounge chairs, and then drawing a path behind it. We'll do something more interesting with this in the future, but right now this is just going to be a mostly unkempt beach near a city park. This is pretty much finished now. I just need to plant a few trees and bushes and make sure we have lighting in the park since I think I deleted that. And there we go, our second major city park and more public waterfront. For the rest of this episode, we're going back over to Salmon Bay proper. We're going to buy a few tiles, place a few large sports facilities, and expand the city footprint quite a bit. But in order to do that, we need money. We have good income, so I'm just going to let the simulation run for a while to build up some funding, and then we'll get started. Alright, I've saved up a bit under $1 million, and I think we can get started. First off, I'm going to buy up land for all the areas we're going to expand into today, and then I'm going to unlock all of the park assets up to large sports parks. This area has both the city elementary and high schools, so it's really important that we add in some real sports facilities here accessible to students from both schools. My plan is to build both the soccer and American football fields behind the schools here. This area is hilly, so there will be some liberal applications of retaining walls here, but typically schools are able to spend a lot of money on sports complexes, so I'm very comfortable putting in these walls. With the streets, I'm just conforming to the existing grid, nothing special. Behind the high school, I have enough room to squeeze in a tennis court. I considered adding some basketball courts too, but the high school asset has tennis and basketball built in, so I didn't want to add too many. Instead, I opted to just add a bit of green space for the students. With a sports complex in place, I'll move on to filling out the road layout for the city expansion, and to start with, I'm going to do some pretty major terraforming. I'm going to basically completely remove this hill to make this area more buildable. You might think this is a bit excessive, but as I've mentioned before, this hill was also removed in real life. In the early 1900s, this hill and a few others were heavily modified to create fill for the bay, and that's what I'm going to do too. I'm going to start filling in this little stream delta area in the city's port. Very soon, I'm going to be upgrading this area to a proper deep water port, so when the city is cutting down the hill, it's also moving all that material to the bay to start work on a major port expansion. In this section, I'm maintaining the city grid again, but don't worry, there's some grid breaking later on. I'm leaving a big open gap in the middle because I want to place in a cemetery, which is a large asset. I actually like the cemetery asset a lot. Cemeteries like this can add a lot of green space to an urban area, and it's common to see even large ones like this inside of cities. However, the main reason I'm putting it down is because our existing small cemetery in Wee, Scotland is full, and the city is getting pretty desperate for death care. For the next section of the city, I need to establish a new arterial avenue. I'm going to send a 4-lane road out towards the lake, following the contour lines to get around the hill to the right. This will be the main thoroughfare leading around the lake, and I'm going to be realigning the grid to follow this road. Since we're getting further from the downtown core, I'm also letting the block size get larger to reflect the drop in density. I'm being careful to get the grid changed to look logical and realistic, which is always a little hard to get right, but I think we're going to end up in a good spot with this. I want to continue the transit line into this new neighborhood, sending the tram down this avenue, which, by the way, I'm naming Westlake Avenue since it runs around the west side of the lake. In order to do that, I'm actually going to widen the road so that it'll maintain 4 lanes of traffic while also having trams running through the middle. I'll build the tracks now, but add the stops in after we filled in the zoning. But before we do that, there's a couple of service expansions to do first. We expanded death care already, but I also want to take a moment to expand police and post coverage. Both of these are just the smallest and cheapest assets in the game right now. The post office is this little yellow shack in the foreground, and the police station is in the next lot behind it. These services are strained, and it's time to improve them. I like the design of the block the police station is on a lot, so I'm going to keep that in city possession and turn that lot into the new post office. For the new post office, I'll drop in this larger asset, and all I really need to do is fix the landscaping. There's fencing on top of the retaining wall that isn't needed anymore, but I'll keep it in just for the sake of history. And in the lot for the old post office, I'll just zone in a small office building. There's a block over by the waterfront that has been sitting empty, and that's where I'm going to place the full-size police station. This location needs some effort on the terrain with a retaining wall, and then I'll rebuild the pedestrian path connecting blocks and call it a day on city services. Now it's time to fill in the new city blocks. To start with, I'm adding a skate park and basketball court to the sports fields, and then filling in the rest with decorative leafy trees and tall evergreen trees that will be good at blocking stadium lights from bothering the neighbors. I want to make the area around the cemetery feel pretty special, so I'll be putting in a bit of extra attention there. I'll fill in along the side near the high school with townhouses, which will allow a lot of kids to walk to school. I'm using the temple add-on for the cemetery on one of the nearby blocks, which actually fits the block size perfectly. This can either serve as a community church, as the asset indicates, or maybe it's an ornate funeral home. Either way, it's a very nice looking building to incorporate into the city itself. Behind the townhouses, I'll line a pedestrian walkway with big leafy trees, and on the other side, I'll put in some larger lot houses. Now I'll make sure that there's plenty of pedestrian connectivity with the cemetery to encourage Sims to walk through or visit, and behind I'll squeeze in a little bit of extra park space. This dog park fits nicely, and then the rest of the space I'll line with some trees and then put in a nice grass surface to make it look like part of the park. The basic plan for this whole area is to continue the existing pattern with small 2x4 North America single-family housing. I'm plopping them manually instead of zoning only because it's easier to get all the houses to line up and fit properly this way. And then along the larger avenue, I'll be zoning in a mix of mixed use, commercial, and office. For those larger buildings along the avenue, I will be going through off camera and making sure the assets that grow in are properly sized and fit their lots. And then I'll lock in a few of them that I like just to make sure that the vibe along that street stays correct as all the buildings level up. In this area where the two grid patterns merge, I want to put in an apartment complex. I'm using these low rent buildings from the French pack, but I'll lock them to level 1 so they don't grow up into something that looks too nice and French. I'm excited to build this here because the apartments will be on a slope and we should get a nice tiered look with the buildings on different elevations that should look pretty impressive from below on Westlake Avenue. As you can tell, I'll be needing Move It a lot here to get everything to actually look correct on the slope. I'm including extra surface parking in this area because these apartments will be hosting a lot of people. To make sure the complex actually does look impressive and to fill in some awkward corners where these grids are merging, I'm planting plenty of trees and using the pocket parks to make everything look nice. Since we're getting pretty close to Westlake now, I'll get our tram line extended through this neighborhood. I'll add 3 new stops down Westlake to the existing line. In the future, I expect this to break into 2 separate lines, but we just don't have the city for that yet. Now it's back to filling in blocks with the same strategy as before and making sure to add in plenty of trees as well. The main difference here is Westlake below the apartments will have larger commercial buildings, like grocery stores with their own parking lots, to serve the extra density from the apartments and the transit. And instead of mixed use, I'm pretty much sticking to commercial and office with just a few regular apartment buildings mixed in. Here in this block is where I'll place that large store, but next to it I want to place a unique signature building which provides some city and neighborhood bonuses. I'm looking for a small enough asset for this corner that is some kind of gathering social place like a cafe or something, and so I went with this fancy gelato place. I'm not sure what the vibe of this area will end up being, but this will nudge it towards being a fairly nice place to live. I'm not going to do too much detailing in this area besides fixing up roads and putting in trees. I expect most of these low density areas near downtown to get pretty majorly redeveloped down the line, and even if we don't get to all that soon, I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on fine details. This is just a neighborhood that was quickly developed and there isn't much history here yet, and we can get finer with the details later on when this gets gentrified. Now that we've filled in the new city neighborhood, this is where I'm going to leave it for today. I want to keep making sure to increase the size of the main city for the next couple of episodes, get that sprawl going. And I think next time we'll also take a look at the port and upgrade it to allow real deep water shipping. I think it's also time to get some more street and district names in place, so if you have any ideas for that, let me know. Thank you for watching, enjoy the showcase, and I'll see you again here soon in Salmon Bay. Good night.